Hey guys, I'm Ash.
And I'm Pete.
We're two friends with a combo of 7 kids ranging from toddlers to 20s and 2 crazy husbands.
Our paths were not easy. With childhood battle wounds, divorce, second marriages and all, we somehow found each other. And together we talk real life, laugh, cry, and figure out how to survive the day.
Music is by Dustbowl Champion. To hear Dustbowl Champion's newest hits, search Dustbowl Champion on Spotify. Hey guys, it's Ash and P.
Hey, we are coming to you from 2 separate locations.
Yes. It sounds funny.
First time ever we've ever done it this way, so bear with us. But the show must go on, and Ashley's a bit under the weather today, so we decided to record separately so she could get her rest.
Yes, thank you.
Ashley, how are you feeling?
Not too bad. Just a bit of a headache and a little bit of congestion, so trying to OD on Advil to make it go away.
All right, good. Okay, well, we kind of left off on some serious, the last couple of episodes have been really serious. And to kind of wrap up those episodes, we kind of wanted to recap on a few things and discuss how we've kind of come out of all that mess, but also how it's kind of affected us individually in our decisions and our choices. And I think throughout life, because I feel like for me, with everything that had happened to me during those times, I mean, I think that I was very hardened in my heart.
Yeah.
And I think that it took a lot for me to really open up and to trust people, like to trust, my own husband, fully trust.
Right.
Just because I think the things that had happened to me back then.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think if we start off with you, because I feel like I hate to make it sound like, one is worse than the other, or what have you. Obviously, they're both traumatic experiences and both horrible things. Both of us had to deal with horrible things. You don't want anyone to go through that. But I do feel like you had to deal with so much more trauma from it.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with that, I feel like getting into that would be good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if we go back to, I think kind of where we maybe had left off was, my mom finally left her husband, my stepdad. She finally divorced him. He's out of the picture. And, I've got my mom and my brothers now in my life, and he's no longer in the picture. But in a sense, he's always there because he's their father.
Right.
And
yeah.
He still lives in the same town as we do. So he does get brought up from time to time. And I think that if I go back and start with, I think one of the hardest things was, it was hard for me to think about how much it would hurt me to let my brothers know or to have them know what kind of man their father was. Because ultimately I could talk about him. I could tell people that story. I could say those things that are all true because they all affect me, but they also affect them.
Right.
And my mom is a grown woman. I mean, she can handle it.
Yeah.
But these were kids,
Yeah.
and the kind of, you know, mental issues that may cause on them, that hurt. And I carried that with me for a long time, and almost a sense of guilt, even though it shouldn't be my guilt.
Right.
But that guilt of it being their father that I felt guilty for.
Yeah.
um and I, like I said, I mean, it really did harden me when I married my first husband. He was the first one, even before my family, that knew everything. And I'm sure that's why I was so attached to him as well, so early on, and had this bond with him, because I opened up to him and I trusted him with that. And you
How
know,
were you able to do that?
I think by then I really wanted someone else to know. I mean, I
Yeah.
wanted
You didn't
someone to
carry it on
know.
your own.
And I
Yeah.
had intimacy issues very early on. So I kind of had to explain a little bit
Okay. That makes
that,
sense.
it would kind of freak me out a little.
Yeah.
Um, I would kind of get uncomfortable. Um, and he was very good. He was very patient. He was very understanding. Um, but I think that it all kind of tied together, and he was someone who was really, really there for me through everything, and kind of the first person, like I said, that I was able to open up to and share those things with. So I think that I think that it was hard for me to let people in, but like for him, I let him in. The problem is not that I shouldn't say the problem. The thing about it was that I think I also stayed with him and I neglected signs with him, because I mean, I truly did love him, but I also had this bond with him for that, um,
Right.
that I overlooked the cheating even before we got married. I overlooked those things, and I blamed myself. I blamed myself for maybe the intimacy issues that I had. I blame myself for, you know, maybe I put, you know, too much into it and I should have backed off. All those things I questioned myself in the relationship, instead of just looking at no big picture. Big picture P
Yeah.
is that, this isn't gonna work. He's not
Right.
ready for
Right.
this. He's not ready
Yeah.
for that. Um, but I was hardened. I was hardened with my relationships, even with women, and I think that it's taken me a long time. And although now I still am a little like this, it's not nearly as much, but I think that it's been very hard for me to see women in a weaker role in a relationship.
Yeah.
I had a very close family member who I saw really go through an abusive relationship. And it was very hard for me because it was hard to watch, and not just because those kinds of relationships are hard anyway, just to be able to see, but it was hard because I look and I see myself, I see my mother, I see different situations that I went through, and I think, you know, if not for yourself, do it for your children.
Yeah.
And um and I will always kind of have a little bit of that mentality, because I think that had my mom left early, had my mom gotten out of that abusive relationship, then the abuse wouldn't have gotten to where it got. And maybe that's not necessarily, maybe it would have still been the sexual abuse, but maybe it wouldn't have been, I don't know. But I think that early on he had already been very abusive with her, physically and emotionally and mentally. That I think that maybe it would have saved some of that, but she was a young woman with a kid. And it's been hard for me, I think, to see women in that light. Like, I'm always like, don't be weak, get up, don't be, but with that came a lot of growing on my end too, to say, me not saying don't be weak is also me being hard, and me having that shield up of, well, I don't need anyone. I don't want it. I don't need it. I could do it for myself. I can handle everything. It's why it took me so long to marry my husband, because I've been very, you know what, I don't want to get burned. I don't want to, I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to depend on anyone else. I can do for myself. I'll do for my child. I will, I'll handle it. But it took a lot for me to learn to let go and to say, trusting him and allowing him to be the man of the house, to be the leader of this family, isn't a weakness.
Right.
It's what you're supposed to do. That's real love. That's the partnership. That's what marriage is.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time for me to get to that point.
Yeah, that's a lot of growth. You look at, in the past, you've looked at relying on someone and counting on someone as a weakness, but in reality, it's a strength when you're able to be vulnerable. You're able to tear down those walls and you're able to open up. That is a strength, because, that hard shell, that's tough you can't go through life forever that way. I mean, it does help you get through certain things, but going through it that way forever prevents you from a lot of joy that you can have by allowing people in.
Yeah.
And then what about, so you had mentioned that, you had intimacy issues. Did that just kind of go away with time, or was it something that you had to work through?
I had to work through it. It probably took me a few years of being with my ex-husband. I mean, we weren't married at the time, but we had already been living together and stuff. And it took me a couple years. It took me a couple years to finally get there. And honestly, I don't even know if it was, I mean, there were so many times where I really wanted to be with him, and I wanted to be, but I mean, it really just, this is part of me not having therapy. I really do believe. Like, I would stop it. I would freak out. I would whatever. And it took me a long time to like kind of block out the bad memories. I think that was one of the issues, is I would like all of a sudden have a bad memory, or I would have that feeling, which is awful, because it's like, why are you having that feeling? This isn't the same person,
Right.
But it almost just became like I think that it almost made being sexually intimate with someone ugly.
Yeah.
I
can see that.
Instead of something that you should enjoy. So it did take me a while to get through that. And ultimately I did. I wish I wish I had been able to do it. That sounds weird. I wish I'd been able to do it earlier. Like I was not trying to be like 13, but I'm just saying like,
right.
I wish it wouldn't have taken me so long and so much pain, because it was very painful in a sense of like having to go through it and feel like, no, I can't, no, I can't, no, I can't. And then
Yeah.
when I finally was able to, I feel like we were almost pretty much done. And
Yeah.
then, I mean, and obviously we worked it out and stayed together and all that, but maybe we shouldn't have, I don't know, but it took me a while, and I will say that, through our marriage, I probably, I still was very, hard shelled through our marriage. And until I went to therapy when we were right before we got divorced, and I did therapy, did I really lay all of this kind of down and kind of just make peace with it.
So did you make peace with it in therapy with him or just by yourself?
No, by myself. So we started as marriage therapy together, and then he stopped going. He didn't want to go. He said he didn't like the therapist, that she didn't like him, and I told him to find another therapist, and he never did. So I kept going, and I ended up working through my personal stuff, and we basically opened up all of it and talked about, my relationship with my mom, my relationship with my dad, all of it. And, the therapist had me write a letter to my mom. I don't know if your did your therapist ever do something like that?
They did. Yeah, I had to write a letter to my abuser.
Okay. So I'm laughing because it was like, it's a letter that I never wanted, like I would never want to read,
Right.
And
it's just getting it all off your chest.
It was just getting it off, but I was almost like so embarrassed to write it down in a letter. It was
embarrassed of the way you felt, or embarrassed of everything that had happened?
Embarrassed of everything that had happened. Like it was like, oh my God, this is embarrassing to look at. Like this is crazy, right? Like this isn't even this is nuts. But and she told me, she was like, you never have to give it to her, but you need to write it down. And I did. And I learned then to really, really forgive her, because I'm not too sure that I really had totally forgiven her at that point.
Well, that's good. Even though you had to look at it and be embarrassed and all of that, it allowed you to move past it, and you guys are able to be where you're at now with such a great relationship.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. I mean, we honestly, like, I just can't even, I can't imagine. I mean, she's, we're so close now. And obviously everything that's happened, and trust me, there had been still times even after that, her and I did not agree on a lot of things. And one thing that I think that I've always had an issue with, and this goes back to these earlier days, is feeling like that your children are coming second to a man.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really was my take growing up, that she treated, us children secondary to her husband. And although I know you should put your husband before, your husband is your partner and your side and everything. And one day your children do leave and it is just you and your husband. There's just a difference. And I felt like she took it to that next level and she really put not her needs, but her husband before her children and her marriage before her children. And I think that because of doing that, it really hurt us kids. And I always struggled with that. I struggled with that until this marriage because even in my first marriage, and he knew that, it was like, hey, my kid's always going to come before you. And my children will always come. Look, my kids can't feed themselves. I'll always take care of them, number one.
Right.
But it's taken a lot for me to get to a point where I could say, okay, no, my marriage has to come first. I have to work on that, because if I don't work on that, then I can't, our home won't last.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
so
you can't provide that family for your kids.
Right. So it's taking a lot of growth and a lot of learning to get to that point in my life.
That makes sense. What about as far as and I know it's hard to say, if it's hard to say, well, I think it could have been different if, it's hard to, because you just really never know. But do you think, had you gotten therapy from like the jump, that things would have been different, even though your mom's husband was still in your life and that type of thing?
Yes, I do.
That's good.
I do.
I mean, I think therapy is huge and so important, but there were so many variables, I feel like, in your situation where it's like, gosh, like,
I think we all needed
so many things I think could have been different.
Yeah. And I think we all needed family therapy. I think that had I gotten it, had my mom gotten it, and even the boys, I think things would have been a lot different.
I think, we did family therapy for about 2 years. And I think I was so young and I don't remember a ton of it. I remember more of my group counseling with my sister and like a handful of other girls that had been abused too. But I assume it must have helped because we continued to go. You don't go for 2 years if it's not working, right?
Right.
So I would assume that in that situation, especially, that probably would have been really helpful for the boys.
Yeah.
Your brothers, that could have been a big difference for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say they probably haven't really gone to therapy for that type of stuff.
They haven't. Yeah. And I've always encouraged them, and even recently I've encouraged them to go and talk about it, because I really do feel that therapy helps. I really do. Like I said, I really don't think that I laid everything to rest and forgave my mom and moved forward until I did the therapy myself.
Yeah.
And figured out that I could talk about it. I could deal with it. I could know that it's part of my past, and I can still love my mom, and I can still forgive her.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I have to do anything. I don't have to forgive him, but I can forgive her. And those were even separate, because that was even hard in the beginning to separate those two. how could I
Yeah.
forgive her and not him, or how could I forgive him? And how does that work?
Yeah.
So I think that even that was hard to separate, and I was able to do that in therapy. I really was.
That's good.
But I want to take a break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about you and your struggles with it. I know you had a setback in your 20s, but I want to talk to you about it and go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back. Hey guys, we're back. And we are going to talk to Ashley about her setbacks a little bit. So, Ash, what do you think that was kind of maybe difficult for you afterwards that you had to deal with? I mean, you like we talked about, you went to therapy right away. Doesn't necessarily mean you didn't have issues still.
Yeah. I would have to say, after dealing with everything, I don't think, and I don't know if it's just, like, I don't know if it's just that I don't remember these things, or if I just didn't have any issues. I was nervous about boys, junior high and stuff like that. But I feel like I never attributed it to having been molested. I just assumed that what most teenage girls, young girls go through. You're nervous when you get your first boyfriend and things like that.
Right.
I don't think that it really impacted me as far as intimacy or anything like that. It wasn't anything that I struggled with. It wasn't something where I had to work through that type of stuff, like, how you had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's just me not really having the memories of any of that, or maybe it is that I just, having the therapy, I had gotten past it, I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but that I had worked through it and that I didn't struggle with it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any problems like that growing up. It wasn't until my now husband, when we were dating, and we hadn't been dating for that long when it happened. One night I just freaked out, and I had a meltdown, and I started crying, and I had just started like envisioning my abuser. Like, I just started having images of him and stuff. Like, I wasn't envisioning any abuse or anything. It was just like a lot of emotion, and I was pretty confused about it. I had gone all those years not having any issues. I think you had asked me in the past, do you know why, or do you think what had happened? And not until a couple of weeks ago I was thinking, and I think it's because my girls were around the age that I was. When Jason and I started dating, Kyla was 4.5 and Deja was 6. And so that's right around the time that that age is the age that I was when it started happening.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that kind of just brought things to the surface, because, I never worried about, you know, obviously I knew when I had kids, I would be different probably about, talking to my kids about, inappropriate touch and, what's acceptable and what's not, and, to watch out for people and those types of things. And I had, pretty much figured that it would be a concern of mine. But it wasn't up until then, I hadn't ever really worried about it. And so there were occasions where I would probably read into things more than most people, just things that were said or done. And I would worry, like, are they okay? Is somebody abusing them? Is there anything like that going on? And so I think it was kind of just like a perfect storm that brought it all about. And so then at that point, I did start therapy again. And I was probably in therapy for, it wasn't that long. I would say probably about like 6 to 9 months. It wasn't too long. And I was able to kind of move past it. But it was actually in that therapy that my therapist had me write the letter to him. And I don't know if that kind of brought closure to it. But I felt like it was very therapeutic. It was good to say those things. When everything happened, I was so little.
Yeah.
I didn't have the voice that I have now, that I had at 20.
Yeah.
So it was very therapeutic to, be able to 14 years, later say, look, this is what you did. And, it wasn't okay. And how could you do that to me? That kind of stuff. So, it was really good, but that was the setback that I had experienced. I didn't have struggles before that. I will say now, and I never really had issue, and I don't know if it was, after being with the girls or whatnot and being in that mom position. But your husband might want to wake you up with a little kiss and stuff like that in the middle of the night. Maybe they get a little excited.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever happens to you,
yeah.
but
yeah.
if I am brought out of my sleep and not I'm very caught off guard and it startles me.
Yeah.
But I would say that's the only real struggle.
It's interesting that you say that, because I do, and it's gotten better. It's gotten a lot better, but that used to be a big, I guess you could say, a trigger, right? Is like the sleep, the night. If I'm asleep and I feel someone coming and starting to touch me, it's like, oh, hold on. Like that, all of a sudden, all my defenses go up.
See, I could see that being such a big thing for you.
Yeah, that was that. And there's certain things that, I think in both marriages, they had to learn, you can't do these things with me, or you can't. And and it's kind of weird to have that. I don't know if it'll ever go away.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, because, it's not something that And I mean, I'm not going to say that it's not something that down the road I might have to deal with, like
Yeah.
who knows, like something may happen and something triggers it in my head, or maybe when I have grandkids, it's like you don't know what's going to cause it. If something does cause it, maybe nothing does, maybe I don't have to worry about it. But that's one of those things, I haven't had issues for so long, but every now and then, some like being startled at night, and nothing ever happened to me at night. When I was molested, it was always during the day, nothing ever at night.
Yeah.
As far as I I mean, again, I don't remember a lot. The incidences that I do recall, they were during the day. And I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe he did stay the night. He was my cousin, so it wouldn't be abnormal for him to have stayed the night. I just don't recall anything ever happening at night. I should probably ask my sister. She probably could tell me if she remembers that. But it is still something that, and I think it's just that, like, it startles me, it scares me. All of a sudden someone's touching me and I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, I went to bed with you at night and we were cuddling before we went to sleep, but you like startled me awake and I'm going to be like now a crazy person in my head,
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's something that, even though I've been fine for, we don't need to say how old I am now, but for quite a few years now, that is still something that can catch me off guard, and, it doesn't take long to kind of snap out of that. In the beginning, it was much worse. But it is still something that, that's just one of those things, I guess.
Yeah.
And it probably won't change. I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe because it is less time that it, goes on for, then maybe it will. But, you mentioned that both of our husbands, they did have to learn, what you can't do, things that you can't do. And Jason always likes to joke, never about anything like that, but he always jokes about like, oh, Ashley's like, don't do this, don't do that, like always. But that is one of those things that it's like, that's a serious,
Yeah.
like that's a big it. And I mean, luckily both of our husbands are very understanding,
yes,
very good about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, even with your first husband, he was very, very slow to, try to do things. He was very patient and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
We've lucked out in those aspects. But, I've never really thought about what it must be like on their end. Like, I don't know. I would assume it's probably not something they think often about,
No,
and in our head more than theirs.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And I think that, like I said, it's definitely, as time has gone on, it's gotten better. I think that I've just kind of, there's going to be things that are always going to kind of, it's going to be there. That memory for me is just going to be there. There's going to be certain things that kind of bring it up, and I have to kind of relive that for a second. But for the most part, it's not an everyday thing. It's not an every month thing. It's just when it happens, it happens.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, luckily they're both very understanding men, and they are very, they may not understand the entire thing as far as like, I understand because I've gone through it, but they understand in the sense of like, they're very patient with it and just want us to be as comfortable as we can be. And they'll do whatever, whatever it takes. did you ever feel like, what about, I mean, with you, see, the difference is like with you and your family, your mom really had your back from like day one.
Yeah.
Um, so you really didn't have that, but was there ever any trust issues with anything else as far as sleepovers or other family members or anything like that? I feel like my trust issues, well, I don't know. They're kind of all, I mean, around the everyone, but
Yeah.
I feel like I
Yeah.
had major trust issues with men, major trust issues with letting people super close to me. Definitely with men. I mean, when you say when people throw out like, oh, daddy issues, like I really did have men issues,
Right.
and
Yeah.
um and it's probably why I'm so why I was so cautious in my relationships, and why
Absolutely.
I was so cautious in, um, I mean, anyone. I'm always on guard, but it takes a lot for me to allow, especially a man close to me.
Yeah.
My stepdad that I have now, my mom remarried, or my mom remarried later in life, and he's a great guy. He's my stepdad, and it's taken him and I. It took us a while to kind of gain our relationship, and it's not because I didn't like him. It's just because I don't let anyone in.
Right. Yeah. Um, I I don't think so. I do have to say, and you know, it's with my boys. It's funny because if you think of a boy, you assume a female is more likely to assault them. Because you just think it's always going to be the opposite sex.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's because I was abused by a male that I always worry about men and teenagers with them. Like they're getting a little bit older, so teenagers aren't exactly a concern, but I don't ever worry about women with them.
Mm-hmm.
Only about other men, and that's always where I think I have a guard up,
Mm-hmm.
is that males in their lives, um, never females, even though I know that females you know do abuse people. I
Yeah.
know it happens, um, but I do worry about them in those types of situations. But um, I I've never worried about, for me, my kids are around, like my siblings, and um, they're not ever really staying over with like a cousin or something like that I might feel uncomfortable about. Um, it's pretty much, my immediate family and that type of thing. So, um, sleepovers, I have to say, when Jackson was in elementary school and he started wanting to have sleepovers, I did worry a bit. And I think that's where I probably was overly questioning of him, just making sure he knows, what's not appropriate and what he needs to let me know and things like that. I don't know. Sometimes, people being too friendly
Yeah.
makes me very uncomfortable. And it
Yeah.
could just be that they're really nice people and they
Right.
just, but that does put me on guard.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think, and not saying there's not nice people out there. I just assume, if you are overly nice, there's something going on. I don't know.
Well, and I honestly do believe that is part of um, being a being a victim of abuse. I think that or especially sexual abuse, I think you do see, like, you are very cautious of people like that. especially
Yeah.
with your kids. You're kind of on the lookout for any kind of sign of something. Because I do that even with my own. I mean, especially, I've got 3 girls.
Yeah.
And it scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
But it's like, I'm always like, uh, just kind of watching. And that sounds terrible because, like you said, it doesn't mean that people aren't just nice, but it's like,
right.
You don't know. People are
There
weird.
are a lot of people that they seem like they're nice people, and then you pull them up on Megan's Law. It's like you see the grandpas on there. There are just everyone's on there, and it's not always. I mean, you hear about religious leaders and teachers and like all of these people in positions where we should be able to trust them with our kids.
Well, I know. And you hear all these terrible stories and you think like, how in the world am I ever going to trust someone else? Because you don't know what goes on behind someone else's closed doors, And that's really, again, I go back to my trust issues, but like my husband is such a good man. He's just such a good guy, and he comes from a good family. And it took forever for me to like see that. Not that I knew he was a good person, but it was like, no, this can't, like, no. You're nice and you're good and all of that, but I still have to protect me and I still have to protect my daughter. And it took forever. And it's like, I just would not let go of the fear of someone being good on the outside, but bad on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's
because that's what they do. They have a facade. They have this outer layer that this is what everyone else sees. I'm sure that people weren't necessarily looking at your stepfather as, he was this horrible guy.
Right.
Right. He was involved in the church and things like that. He was around whatever. My abuser was 12 years old. You look at it. How many times do you look at a 12-year-old and think, oh, that person's a molester?
Right.
Like never, it's like, that's not what you do.
Right.
Because, we don't expect that. But having gone through it, you're right. You do have this where, if something seems too good to be true, it must be. And I think a little more excessive than what the average person would, just because we expect for something to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it a lot. We expect something to be wrong.
Yeah. Which it is sad. It is sad, but I'd much rather not have had gone through the experience, but I would much rather be looking for stuff than just assume everyone's good.
Yeah.
I would rather be more aware, because as much as, other people who haven't been through it may know about it, I don't think you're necessarily putting it into your thoughts and actually really keeping an eye out if you haven't, because it's just not something that you're not going to recognize those off things. Other people may overlook them, but you think, I know about this, and so it sucks, but I would rather be on the lookout and let someone turn out to be an amazing person and me have given them a little harder time in the beginning,
right. Yeah.
And know that it's okay, and I mean, even with us being on the lookout and that kind of thing, it still doesn't mean our kids are always going to be safe,
Yeah.
but I guess it's just a little, I guess maybe it reassures me some that at least I'm not like rose colored glassing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But
Well,
yeah,
hey,
I'm in luck. I didn't have to deal with as much trauma as you, so it didn't impact me as much on that. On my end, I feel like it's more so with the parenting and making sure my kids are okay, and worrying about their safety.
well, I will say this. I think every situation makes us stronger. Every experience we go through in life makes us stronger, whether we like it or not, whether we should have ever gone through it or not. Um, I'm grateful that I am here today to say
Yeah.
I survived it
Right.
and I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm great. I'm okay.
Right.
um, I think that all in all, there comes a point where, and this is kind of one of my like, I am uh, a little bit, I set the bar high for myself, and I usually set the bar high for others as well, especially those around
Yeah.
me, including
Yeah.
my kids and my husband, and not because I want them to be superstars and they need to be the best of the best of the best, but because I never want them to settle, and I always want them
Right.
to know that you can do anything. And I look at it and I think, look, do I have every reason, if I want to sit there and look at what I went through, do I have every excuse to be a this or that? I could have been
Yeah.
on the streets. I could have been a teen mom, much like my mom was a teen mom. I could have been, I could have turned to drugs.
Yeah.
I could have turned to um, alcohol. Um, I could have turned to anything, but
Yeah.
I didn't. And I don't know if that's just because God had mercy on me and he just brought me out of it. I don't know if that's because I found strength, and part of that was trusting in him, and then part of that was wanting to be more and not wanting to be like, I always felt like growing up, I was like, I never want to be like my mom. And that sounds like harsh because I love my mom today. My mom's a very strong woman. The fact that she's been through what she has and she's come out of it, I'm grateful for. But I always would say I never wanted to be like my mom because I never wanted to be weak to anyone, especially a
Yeah.
man. And I never
Yeah.
wanted to feel like I ever let my children down. Those were big
Yeah.
things for me. And I never wanted to depend on anyone else. I just wanted to do for me and my family and be able to make it on my own. And I feel like I could have done whatever. I could have made all of the excuses to do whatever, but I didn't. And I'm not like, I'm not Oprah, but
Right.
but all I'm saying is, um, I did okay. I'm
Yeah.
okay mentally and physically. I'm okay. I have a
Yeah.
beautiful family, and I have wonderful friends, and I have a very blessed life, and that is all I could ever ask for. And those are the
Right.
most blessings that I could have ever received. It's more than monetary. It's more than anything that could be bought. It's just I have a very blessed and full life, full of love. And I would not have had those things had I turned to those other things. So I think for me, I take out of it, you can make any excuse you want to. You can have a bad path. You can have a bad, childhood or whatever, but you make it what you want. You make your life what you want, and don't fall victim to that.
Yeah.
And I feel that you could say the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. You're absolutely right. And, again, if I had the choice to not have gone through it, of course, I would choose to not have gone through it. But I do think I am a stronger person than I would have been if I hadn't gone through it. I think it has taught me a lot, about myself. And I am blessed as well. I agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you so much for swapping with us today. Thanks for handling all of this. Talk to you soon. Segment music by Callie Grace. For more of Callie Grace's hits, follow Callie Grace on iTunes and Spotify today.